Well, today I have a man on the line that I just watched him grow up, man. He come into Skywatch and just started writing these books, man. And now he's with Prophecy Watchers. And this is a well-read man and well-researched man and written many, many books. I'm really, really pleased to have him on the show and to conversate with him today. But I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, Josh Peck. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
For those that are not familiar with you and your work, can you just give us a synopsis of your expertise and interests?
Sure. So I've been in full-time ministry for, how many years now? I think probably close to 10 altogether. I started off just doing my own thing, learning how to write a book. It was my first book and everything. And I self-published a bunch of books before going to Skywatch. Then I was there for 7 years and worked there. And then just recently, like you mentioned, I moved over to Prophecy Watcher. So, and I've been here for about 6 months, absolutely loving it. And so, yeah, that's just kind of like a really brief, my background. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm excited to see what the Lord has for the future.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely inspiring for people, like me, that's like studying these subjects and just getting into podcasting and writing books and things like that. So, I mean, if you're definitely a inspiration for us, hey, us little guys can make it too, man.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. When I was first starting out, I was looking up to people like, L.A. Marzulli and Tom Horn and people like that. And so, and then having some other friends that were my age that I made just by doing interviews and stuff, that kind of gave me that feeling too. So I'm glad that I can inspire that and anybody else who wants to get into this kind of stuff.
Well, I've never heard the story, but I'd like to ask you this before we get started on our subject matter. Like, how did you get involved with Skywatch? How did that happen?
Yeah, it was actually Dr. Michael Lake. So I had two books out, Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots, which actually are still available, and we'll probably get into a lot of the content from those books in this interview. Both of those are still available now at prophecywatchers.com. Best place to get it. And I wrote those books to be timely, to be timeless. So the information that's in there, even though the books are a few years old, they're still relevant today. Anyway, I had just come out with Cherubim Chariots, and I was doing interviews for those. And Dr. Michael Lake invited me on. He had found my stuff just kind of on his own. And, I've heard of him because Skywatch had just started, and he was going to be one of the first guests. I think he might have been the first guest. It was either him or Sharon Gilbert, and then I was like the third one or something. But anyway, so he had me on. We did the interview, and then I guess I found out later, but I guess he actually took my books and gave them to Tom Horn and said, you need to read these and take a look at this guy. I think there might be something here. So Tom did, and he, I guess he was impressed with what he read. So he invited me to fly out and do an interview at Skywatch. And this wasn't a job offer yet or anything. This was just to fly out and do an interview. We ended up driving from Michigan to Missouri, which was a very long drive. And Christine and I were extremely, extremely poor at the time. So it took like every bit of gas money that we had to do it.
Hey, and you got a strong marriage, man. Those cross-country trips, that tests a relationship right there, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly can. Yeah, we had a blast, and, Skywatch put us up in a hotel and stuff. And so we did, I did the interview, and this was in the very early days of Skywatch, where they were considering just having Gary Stearman host the show, which didn't end up happening. They went with Derek because Prophecy Watchers and Skywatch are about 4 hours away from each other. So it's just, Gary's not going to be driving 4 hours back and forth every week to do that. But for the first few episodes, Gary Stearman did the interview. So that was my very first television interview ever, and it's still online today. And it was a lot of fun, and it went really well. And so after that, me and Tom stayed in contact. And then just one day he sent me an email and he offered me and Christina both jobs at Skywatch. So, of course we accepted because I was, I had just come off of disability, so I was only doing, I have a rare bone disease and I've had to have a bunch of corrective surgeries and stuff. And it's a lot better now than it was back then. But, so the only thing that I had for a living that I even could do was just ministry work. And, so of course we jumped on the opportunity. We accepted the jobs and moved to Missouri, and then, the rest is history. That's how all that happened. So thank you, Dr. Michael Lake.
Yeah, Michael, he's awesome. I actually talked to him just maybe a week or two ago on my other show that I do with my friends, the Dig Bible podcast, and we had him on. He's a great guy.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, he is. He's great.
Yeah. Well, today, man, I just really wanted to dive into something that you're well familiar with and you've spoken on quite a bit, but I've not spoken with you, so I want to speak with you on it. But,
sounds good.
But the subject matter of CERN, and I've talked to some people that has, not written books on it, but had opinions on it and things like that. So I really wanted to get your expert opinion on it, because you have well over, 10,000 plus hours on this subject and the things around it. But with that, there's always the conspiratorial talk, and you hear about the sacrifices and the Shiva dancing god of destruction out front, and that they're opening portals. And so this is definitely something that I want to pick your brain on and separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, definitely. We can start wherever you'd like. Do you want me to just explain what CERN is and how the LHC works and all that to start?
Yeah, that'd be good for those that just are not familiar with it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So CERN it's a multinational government body, basically. It's an organization. And what they do, it's made up of physicists and scientists from all over the world. What they do is they basically decide what happens with the Large Hadron Collider and other things too, but usually the focus is on the Large Hadron Collider with most people. That's what most people are most interested in. And the Large Hadron Collider is basically just a particle collider. Biggest machine ever invented, as far as we know, by man. And it collides particles together, and then scientists are able to look at that explosion, look at the aftermath, I should say, of the particle collision. And in that aftermath, sometimes new particles show up. Not new as in they didn't exist before, but new as in we haven't discovered them yet. And the reason that it works like that, it's not that these two particles are crashing together and exploding and we're looking at the pieces of the particles. That's not exactly what's happening. The reason the machine works the way that it does is based around something called quantum field theory. And basically what it means is for every particle, there's an associated field from which that particle comes from. So, gravitational fields, we know we have a gravitational field. The particle for that field would be the graviton. There's an electromagnetic field. The particle for that is the photon. So what it means is, and fields, they're everywhere. They're all over. When the field level is set at zero, there's no particles. There's nothing happening. So in the electromagnetic field, it would be dark. When you turn on your light switch, you're actually you're exciting that electromagnetic field. You're making it vibrate and move, and that vibration is the photon. So when we think about CERN and LHC and how all this works, we have to think about particles totally different. They're not little tiny pieces of matter like most of us think. They're actually tiny vibrations in these quantum fields, and we actually know that to be absolutely correct, because if they were little tiny pieces of matter, the LHC wouldn't work. It wouldn't work the way it does. What's actually happening when those particles collide, they're sending the energy from that collision vibrates out into other fields that are around, other fields that we may not have discovered yet. So this most recently happened in 2012 when it was announced that they had discovered the Higgs boson. So basically what they did is they collided two particles together, and they examined it, and then they saw that a Higgs boson popped up because that energy from that collision vibrated the Higgs field. That at that time was just theoretical. We didn't even know if that was real or not yet. But then they saw the Higgs boson. And they repeated the experiment over and over and over again to make sure that it was all accurate and it wasn't a fluke.
And so is this like
that's
sonar,
actually,
it sounds like?
as an example, you could think of it like that. Sound is more like pressure waves in the atmosphere, so it's not exact. But as an example, you could think of it that way. So every field that exists, it exists in all points of space at the same time. So that collision brings the particle into being by vibrating that field. And again, the vibration itself is the particle. So what's really cool about that is like even the particles in our bodies, like everything, and it's unfortunate because New Age latches onto this and then twists it into something it's not. But that aside, the particles that make up your body are just vibrations, really. And that's what makes up matter. And so it's really cool to think about it like that. And so the most accurate science that we have today is quantum field theory, and that's what it states. And they built the LHC around this theory, and the machine works. So we know that this quantum field theory, that this is the right description of the physical universe. So that's basically what they're doing. Now, there are some valid, some not valid. There are a lot of rumors about CERN and that they're doing this or that. CERN is so big. Excuse me. CERN is so big and full of so many people. I would be open to the idea. I wouldn't doubt that there's probably some people on top that could just be straight up Satanists. Could be. But you're going to get that anywhere. I mean, that's going to be anywhere. So, for example, you mentioned portals, and I get this question a lot. Can CERN open a portal? Well, that is actually, in a way, something that they're trying to do. So their science director, Sergio Bertolucci, that was his name. It took me a minute to remember. He went on record and he's quoted as saying something along the line, I don't have the exact quote, but something along the lines of, if we open a door to another dimension, unknown unknowns might come through. And they've had on their website this goal that they want to discover higher dimensions, and they want to actually probe and map higher dimensions somehow. And they're mostly thinking of doing that through these particle collisions. And that gets into the weirdness of gravitons. So the way that they would find out, one of the ways, there's different methods on how to discover a higher dimension. But one of the ways is gravitons. Even though we haven't discovered gravitons, we know they exist because there's a gravitational field, and every field has to have a particle. Gravitons, by what all the math predicts, should be able to travel to higher dimensions just on their own naturally. And that might be why gravity is so weak, because it's a big mystery in science. There's four main forces. There's the weak and strong nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravity. But gravity is so much weaker than those other three. And that's easy to demonstrate. Put a paperclip on the table and pick it up with a magnet. That the entire Earth is pulling down on that paperclip, but a kitchen magnet can counteract that. So compared to the rest of the forces, gravity is incredibly weak. And one of the theories is that gravity is actually leaking into higher dimensions, and that could be why. So the way that they would find that out is they would look at these collisions, and when these collisions happen, the energy is spread out evenly. So if they find gaps where stuff should be, where energy, where vibrations or whatever, where it should be, if they find gaps, then that's a good indication that that's where gravitons were, but they flew into a higher dimension. So that's one way that they're trying to make this discovery. And there's others as well. So the idea, can CERN open a portal? I mean, technically, yes, but there's some things that we have to look at. First, most of the scientists, I would say 99% of the scientists there are just there for science. I know a couple of them myself. There's Christians that work there. CERN on its own isn't like, it's not like everybody there is just pure evil. Most people, if there is anything evil going on there, most of the scientists don't even know about it, or they're just not involved with it at all. Now, as far as the portal idea, the machine, the way that it works right now is very similar. It's actually exactly the same as what happens in our atmosphere every day. So we have cosmic rays coming into our atmosphere all the time. And because of that, we have constant particle collisions all throughout our atmosphere all the time. So that's the only thing that the LHC is doing. It's doing just that, but it's just more measured and precise. But it's so they can actually look at it. But it's the same thing. So if somebody wants to think that CERN is opening a portal right now, based on the information we have, they would have to also accept that portals are being opened in our atmosphere all the time, all over the place, for all time. It's always been happening. So, you know, I mean, it would be millions and billions of portals every single day. What's one more, you know? So, so there is that aspect to it. Now, it could change if they you know, they do routine like upgrades and stuff. There's also been plans like in China that they want to build a particle collider that I think is like 20 times more powerful than the LHC. And it could be when they get into those higher power levels, if they surpass what's happening in the atmosphere, then we'll be in unknown territory. But as far as right now, no, that's not happening. And then somebody might say, well, that they're just not telling us. Maybe they are doing these experiments and they're just not telling us. Well, you have a problem because it takes a lot of people to run this thing. Yeah, you would have to keep everybody quiet. I mean, it wouldn't happen. And this also is a government run thing, and the government's not great at like keeping. I mean, you can tell when you listen to a politician if they're lying or not. They're not good at it. I don't think that any government would be. I think they're too inept to be able to keep something like that secret, and for what purpose? Now, there are ways in which CERN could be used nefariously, and one of them is with extra dimensional communication. This is something that is possible, and they've been open about. The things that people want to say CERN is doing and they're keeping secret, they wouldn't. They wouldn't have any need to keep it secret, because with something like I'm about to tell you, they've been open about this for over 10 years, this communication thing. It's been on science programs. They're open with their stuff, you know. There are weird things like that ritual that I can talk about in a minute. But as far as actually using the machine for some purpose, they're very open about it, and they kind of have to be, because so many people work there, and they're not going to be able to keep everybody secret. And it's multinational, so you got all these other countries involved. You're not going to be able to keep all that secret. But what they have been, like what we know, what they are open about. There is one thing that they will keep secret, though. They don't keep it secret forever, but there's a good reason they do this. So the Higgs boson was actually discovered 6 months before it was announced. And the reason for that is everything in quantum physics is based on percentages. So if you have one collision and you see something that looks funny, but it never happens again, that probably was a fluke. It's either the machine didn't read it out right, or just some weird quantum thing happened, and it's a fluke and it doesn't mean anything. That kind of thing happens regularly. So when they make a discovery, they have to test it again and again and again for months to really bring up those percentages as high as they possibly can, to where they're comfortable saying, yes, this is a real discovery. Because once they announce that, other labs around the world are going to try to replicate that. And if they're wrong, they're going to be really embarrassed. So right. So with that, the Higgs boson discovery, they did keep that secret, but it's for a good reason. And they wanted to have time to, you know, repeat the experiments and stuff. So that, as far as I know, that's the only thing that they really can keep secret, because that's something that every physicist in the world would agree with. Yeah, let's not put this out in the public until we know for sure. Right. So anyway, the communication thing. So the idea is, if and when we discover gravitons, when we figure out how to do that and what conditions to do that, we'll be able to manipulate gravitons. We can already manipulate particles now. Physicists can entangle two particles. They can do whatever they want. They can alter the spin. So the idea is to manipulate a string of gravitons and affect the spin of certain ones. So, it might be like up, spin up, down, up, whatever, for like a Morse code. And then send the gravitons, which they naturally can do on their own anyway, send it to a higher dimension, and then set up a type of receiver or set up some type of detector to see if anything comes back. And they've been talking about this for well over 10 years, probably a lot longer. The first I heard about it was about 10 years ago. So I know that that's something that they're either actively working on they're definitely actively working on discovering gravitons. Whoever discovers a graviton, it's surefire they're winning the Nobel Prize. It's like the holy grail of quantum physics. And that if and when that happens, it'll be huge news for a long time. It'll be a bigger discovery than the Higgs boson, and that was really big news in 2012. So once they can do that, though, that's when I'm going to be like really, really paying attention to what they're using this new knowledge for. And I believe if they're going to set up a communication system, I believe they will be open about it because they don't really have a reason not to be. They don't care what us conspiratorial Christians think about what they're doing. They don't care.
Right.
They want Nobel Prizes and they want funding, and they have to be open about what they're doing in order to get all that. Otherwise, their funding dries up. And communicating with an extra dimension is going to be extremely exciting for the people who are going to be funding these projects. So once that discovery happens, and there's no way that they would make that discovery and keep it a secret forever. They might wait a little while, a few months to make sure it's real, but the allure of a Nobel Prize would be too tempting to just keep that a secret. So it
There's
will
always
eventually.
Egos.
Yeah, exactly. And so it will eventually come out. They may have already discovered it and we just don't know yet. And they're just testing to make sure. That very well could be. So once that happens, once that discovery is made, I'm going to be really like looking at what representatives from CERN are saying about what they're going to do with that, because I bet top on the list would be this extra dimensional communication device thing. Now, to me, if that happens, I've theorized, well, could that be what initiates Revelation 9? Could that be? Because in a sense, think about it, it's just a more scientific way to pray to, to petition to ancient false gods. That's from the biblical perspective, that's what they would be doing. I believe that there are extra dimensional entities, but I believe they're fallen ancient, angels,
away.
like they're fallen angels and stuff. The false lower G gods. An angel of God isn't going to answer that. Like an obedient angel isn't going to answer that, because this way of communicating it's prohibited. You're not supposed to be praying to false gods, and that essentially that's what praying is. You're talking to an extra dimensional being of some kind, So I've kind of thought, I wonder if it's going to get to the point, because ultimately people are going to chase their false gods. And we know that this has happened in the past, like the Tower of Babel incident, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, and this gets into Deuteronomy and like a bunch of stuff, but the basic story is during the Tower of Babel incident, what a lot of people miss is when God scattered the nations, these false angels, these false gods, these fallen angels that these people that were building the tower were worshiping, they became over the people. That's why we have all these false religions, and then God kept Israel. But that's why we have all these false religions around the world. So you have people that are continuing to follow these gods and trying to reach out to them, and that's why I say I'm sure for a few people that are on the top, that probably is their goal. They're not all atheists. There's a lot of them that believe in like the Indian epics and stuff like that. So that's why that Shiva statue is out there. It was a gift, and it's about the destruction of the universe and everything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of symbolism there. I'm not saying CERN's trying to destroy the universe, but at least the person that gifted that to CERN, and I forget his name, I have it in my book, but clearly there's some part of him that believes this stuff. And so there's going to be other people just naturally that believe in this stuff. So they're reaching out to these false gods. And I think there could be a time where God says, okay, you don't want me, you want these guys, you think they're going to treat you right? You got them. Let's see how they treat you. And maybe that's Revelation 9, when God finally has enough and the bottomless pit is opened and these horrible cherubim things come out, these fallen angels come out and attack the non-believers. I think that that could be a result of things they're trying to do now. Now, I don't think we're going to wake up tomorrow and the bottomless pit is going to be open. I believe in the tribulation, rapture, all that stuff's got to come first. But, and I know not everybody agrees. That's totally fine. But I think that what's happening now could potentially, maybe, lead to the fulfillment of Revelation 9. So we'll see what happens with this communication thing. But people who are listening, keep your eyes on. If you hear that the graviton was discovered, keep your eyes on CERN and see what they're doing. And I will too, and I'll report as best as I can on it.
And I'm glad you explained everything, because I'm a layman. And so I'm so glad that you took the time to explain, the frequencies and sending out these frequencies and finding these things. And that's kind of what they're doing. And it makes more sense to me now because that Shiva statue, she is he or she, whatever, but it dances and holds creation together. And when she stops dancing, that is the end of time. And it's like, I've heard it explained she's dancing to what's his name talked about the music of the spheres, the silent song that plays that holds everything together. So it makes sense that they're actually making frequencies and she's dancing to them. But I had Putty Putman on. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's got a degree. He's a pastor, but he's got a degree in quantum physics. And I just kind of asked him about CERN, and he said, we all have our lenses. He said, and I've not really taken a deep, dive into CERN. He said, but just from my point of view, he said, from a scientist point of view, he said, that doesn't have a religious connotation to it. He said, us as Christians, we look at things in a spiritual way. He said, scientists don't. He said, he said, maybe, he said, the guy that created the atom bomb, he said he had a famous quote and said, I have become death itself. And he mentioned like the Shiva, the destroyer. He said, so maybe, he said that was kind of like a salute to him, as far as like a science mind goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I fully agree with that. Like, most of the scientists there are just looking at it scientifically. They're not looking at any of this other stuff. And then, weird things happen. Like, there was this murder ritual thing, and we still don't know all the details of that, but that there was a video that came out a few years ago, and I wrote about it in my book, but where it showed a parody of a ritualistic, like, cult murder, like a sacrifice, like a human sacrifice. And, that blew up, that went viral, and a lot of people thought it was real at first. It's not real. Nobody actually died. It was a parody, but in dark occult magic circles, a parody can be just as good as the real thing with whatever they're trying to do. So we still don't know if it was if it was an actual parody ritual for occult purposes, or if it was just some people doing it as a joke. But here's the weird thing. If it was just a joke and there wasn't anything to it, why didn't we hear who did it and that they got fired? Because that should have been a big embarrassment on CERN. Like, I would imagine if it was just some young scientists or something that were like in an internship or something there, and they did that, I would imagine, like, if I was running CERN, I would say, make them public, show their faces, show who they are for everybody, so we can assure everybody that a murder didn't happen, and fire them publicly.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like it seems like that would be the thing to do, to just show everybody, like, hey, we're not trying to hide anything. There was no murder, but we didn't hear anything about it after. And so that to me was always weird, that there was no real resolution, and CERN just kind of let it peter out and didn't say anything about it, as far as I know, at least not anything towards getting any real answers. So to me, if it was this like dark magic parody occult thing, I could see why they might want to keep that quiet. If it was just a dumb joke, I don't see why they would at all. I mean, we're constantly seeing in the headlines stuff like that. I mean, recently somebody, for a TikTok video, which just was really stupid, and but somebody put something on a railroad track to cause a train to derail, and then like filmed it as if it was just like happening by chance. He got caught and arrested. He's in a bunch of trouble now. But we're constantly, and they made him public. We're constantly seeing headlines like that when people do dumb stuff like that. They're made public, but for some reason, not with that CERN thing, not with that murder parody thing. You would think that would, if it was just a joke. So I don't know what to do with that one. It's definitely weird. I know me and Tom wrote a book a few years ago about it called Abaddon Ascending, which I don't think is in print anymore, and I don't know why. But that book, we talk about that, and I know that Tom believed it was a Tom Horn. He believed it, my co-author of that book. He ran Skywatch, for those who might not be familiar with who Tom Horn was, but he passed away recently. But in that book, he wrote a lot about, like, he believed that was a dark magic parody thing. He didn't think that was a joke or anything at all. He fully believed that. So, and he wrote quite a bit about that. So I tend to lean towards that way of looking at it. I think it probably was an attempt. I don't know if it actually worked or did anything, but I think that it was probably an attempt by certain occultists there, and they might not even have been high level in CERN, who knows, to try to do something. What I don't know. Do a parody sacrifice to some false lower G god that they worship. I have no idea, but that's about the extent that I know of that parody ritual thing. But yeah, it's just, so every once in a while we get weird stories like that from CERN that make me think something's up there.
And then that Reddit story too that was going around a while back, and it was saying that, I can't remember if it was high school kids or college kids, but they actually done like a tour for a school or something like that, and that they toured the facility, and this student was taking pictures, and he or she got a picture of this glass case and with a document in it, and I think they said that it was like lambskin parchment or something, old school like that, and had all this cryptic writing and stuff on it. And they snapped a picture of it, and it went online, and people were saying that it was communication from the other side. And then all of a sudden, that picture was wiped off the internet. You couldn't find it anywhere. But I know it was a big discussion, like going around on Reddit and stuff a few years ago. Did you hear of that?
No, I haven't. I've actually missed the whole Reddit train. Once it came out, I already had the things that I was using, and I was already starting to get to the point where it's like, I don't want to learn a new thing. And so far I just haven't. So I'm totally clueless on anything that happens on Reddit. I actually had not heard that story before, so that I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I don't know anything about that one. That sounds weird though.
Yeah, and it's hard to separate fact from fiction, especially nowadays, because you got people doing things on purpose for clicks and for TikToks and making these fake AI pictures. I mean, we've never been able to get information so freely now, but there's so much, just dung that's mixed in with it. It's hard to separate it sometimes, especially with all the technology.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to get worse. I mean, it's to the point now that a video of something just isn't proof anymore, because they're so easy to fake. Like, all these, like we have more UFO videos now than we ever have before, but it's like, yeah, but most of those are probably fake. Whereas, in the 60s, 70s, whatever, that would have been a lot harder to fake back then, but we still at least had video cameras, but they also weren't that good because it was 50 years ago. So it's like the better technology gets, the easier it is for people to lie to each other. And I think we're going to keep seeing that. I mean, we see it in news stories, and that's why we got to be, especially with CERN, we got to be like, real careful with this kind of stuff. When you have a topic that just naturally invites conspiracy stuff, and there are, and I don't use that derogatorily, to an extent, I'm a conspiracy theorist myself, but I think that as conspiracy theorists, we really have to look at things carefully and logically, and we can't just buy into anything that we read somewhere because it's so easy to fake. And why wouldn't somebody fake it if they can get views, if they can get clicks, if they can get people to look at their articles so they can get ad revenue from it? Of course, people are going to do that. So there's a ton of misinformation around CERN, but that's not to say that everything CERN does is great. That's not to say that there's not some demonic influence happening there. There very well could be. But we have to look at this. So like the portal thing, I mean, that's a pretty easy one to debunk. It's like, even if they are, it's happening all around our atmosphere anyway. So it's not, what is it going to do? Now that, again, like I mentioned, that could change if they upgrade the machine, if they start getting into, wanting to create black holes and things. That's different. Like a black hole is totally different than just a particle collision. I don't believe that just a particle collision is going to create a portal. Like, I just don't think that's happening. Like a portal to where and why? Like, why would that rip the barrier between the third and the fourth spatial dimensions? Like, it just that doesn't make sense to me. If they start getting into black hole territory and they start being able to stabilize them, the idea is we wrote about this in Abaddon Ascending as well. The idea is black holes are obviously very dangerous, but the idea is if you can create a black hole and if you can control the spin in a way that counteracts the crushing gravity. So it's basically like gravity against like centrifugal force. I mean, it's like how how the moon orbits the Earth, but the Earth doesn't pull the moon down. It's because the centrifugal force is making the moon want to go out to space by spinning, but gravity is pulling it in. So there's a place of equilibrium. I mean, it's like, if you take a yo-yo on a string and whip it around, it's the same thing. So the idea is if you can do that with a black hole with its spin, you might be able to stabilize it so it doesn't have this crushing gravity. And then that might be a portal. If they start messing around with black holes, then these people that are saying that they're creating portals might be onto something. That would be the point where I'd be like, okay, if they're they would be open and public about this. They're not going to hide it. But if they create a black hole and can adjust the spin to counteract the gravitational forces in there, then yeah, where does that black hole lead? And that's like the big question everybody wants to know. So that absolutely, that could be a portal to a higher dimension. I mean, black holes are so destructive. I could see something like that tearing a hole in a dimensional barrier. I don't see that with just a particle collision because we would have that all the time. I mean, we would constantly be inundated with things from the fourth spatial dimension. It would be obvious. We would see it all the time. And we'd be able to measure it, but we don't. So I don't think particle collisions themselves can create, just by itself, the way they're doing it now, can create a portal. But if they really ramp up the power and really ramp up the energy, and they can slam those particles together even harder to create a rip, to create a black hole, then yeah, then we might be in CERN is creating a portal territory.
And I got two questions for you from your perspective, because
Sure.
I know I've heard a lot of people comment and say, the more active, CERN gets, the more crazy and weird the skies get. And sometimes you have storms and hurricanes and things like that, associated close time frames within their activation. And then also, do you think that there is some people calling the shots that kind of poke, at us conspiracy theorists sometimes? Because if not, I mean, it's very strange coincidences, especially like our last eclipse that we had. There was lots of people freaking out, talking about, end of days, end of the world. And it was a sign from the book of Revelation and, judgment of God, all this kind of talk. And then boom, they decide to generate on the day the eclipse happens, and everybody's already freaking out anyway, thinking the world's going to end. So it's like, if they're not trying to harness some kind of power or do something, supernaturally or something like that, in the very least, their timing sucks, or it's really great timing and they're doing it to poke at us.
Oh yeah, I could absolutely see that. I mean, they're human beings, and I could absolutely see somebody doing that just to get us riled up, or just to, well, I mean, even just to get CERN in the news, because it's like, if I'm running CERN and if I'm not a Christian, I know that I could run an experiment, because it's all about funding. They want to gin up excitement, because the more CERN is in the news, the more they can get funding from their donors and things. Because it's like, hey, it's a hot topic. Like, we should invest money in this kind of thing. So if I'm running CERN and I know that I have this particle collision that I want to do, am I going to do that on just a normal day? Or am I going to do that on a day where I know it's going to get news stories, and I know that the conspiracists are kind of going to do my advertising for me, and they're going to spread the information everywhere, and everybody's going to be talking about CERN? Well, of course, I'm going to do it on the day of the eclipse where something like that's going to happen. So I could absolutely see, and it's probably nothing more than just that. I mean, because there are people that are thinking, well, it's this ritual, it's this thing. Maybe, but I more likely, just because, I mean, we know how people are, most likely, I think that they chose that just because they knew that it would really hit the news cycle, and it would get people talking, and it would get everybody would be talking about CERN again. And again, it all goes back to money. It all goes back to funding and stuff. So, and then your other question about the weather. Well, I guess I would go back to, if CERN was doing something that affected the weather should have already been affected, because of all the particle collisions that are happening every day in our atmosphere. And it should have already been affected even more than what CERN could do, because CERN is like under the ground. Obviously, weather, hurricanes, that stuff happens in the air. Well, all these particle collisions are happening every day, and have been since the beginning of time. So I personally haven't seen, I'm open to it, but I personally haven't seen any evidence to show that CERN is doing anything that even could affect the weather. There are other things that very well could be, but I don't think CERN's one of them. It affects CERN. The LHC affects things on such a quantum scale. I mean, it's like, it's smaller than microscopic. It's inconceivable. Like, we can't even conceive how small this is. It's such a small scale. It doesn't affect anything. It wouldn't be able to create a hurricane, like one particle collision, or even if they did 1,000 a day, they're never going to be able to surpass unless if they increase the energy. But at the energy that they have right now, which I believe is 14 TeV or something, I'd have to look at it again, but based on the energy that they have now, it's not enough energy to surpass what's happening all around the world all the time in our atmosphere from cosmic rays. So, to me, I mean, like, could it? Yeah, I mean, of course, there's always a possibility that something could happen, but I haven't seen really any evidence. Definitely not enough to convince me. I haven't seen any evidence that CERN's doing anything that would affect the weather. But that could be. I mean, I'm open to it, so we'll have to just keep our eyes on it and see what happens.
So you're saying it's like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber. You're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah. In quantum physics, there's always a chance. Yes.
One thing, too, I want to pick your brain on was the location. There's this guy, he calls himself, I can't remember his name, but his channel is called The Trumpet. And he uses Ezekiel 33:3, when I see the sword fall upon the land, I will blow the trumpet. And he talks about the location of CERN and how, in the Bible, it says that this is where Satan's throne is. And then, the actual, I can't remember the martyr's name, but, the martyr that died, and it said that he died in this land where this throne of Satan was. And then I've heard you guys talk on Skywatch about, I believe it was Skywatch, about how they built this on a location that was a temple to Apollyon.
Yes. Okay. So I don't know about the throne of Satan thing. Because isn't that in Revelation? Isn't that in Pergamum or something? I'd have to look at it again. But no, on that second point, 100%. So whether they knew or not, that's up for debate. But regardless if they knew it or not, they built the LHC in what seems like the most inconvenient place. Like, it borders two countries, France and Switzerland. And when they were building it, when they were digging for the tunnels for this, they actually had to stop construction because they found Roman ruins. And as it turns out, that area used to be it was a Roman settlement, and they worshipped Apollyon, and they believed that that's where the bottomless pit was. Like that's where they believed it existed. And to me, that's almost too coincidental. That's like, okay, either demonic forces inspired people to do that, and the people had no idea what they were doing when they picked that location, maybe, or the people knew that the history of that area and knew that ancient people worshipped Apollo, and they knew the connection to the bottomless pit, and they're thinking, hey, you know, we're going underground and portals and things. And so I don't between those two extremes, like, I don't know where like it falls in line, but that absolutely is the history of that area, which is creepy and weird, and it just brings us right back to Revelation 9 again. So yeah, that's another piece of evidence where if it turns out CERN has something to do with the fulfillment of Revelation 9, it really wouldn't surprise me. It might not be that, but if it does, I mean, that's just another piece of evidence showing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like your perspective too. It could very well be that they are looking to make splashes and waves and get funding, and what a better place to build this than over the the temple of Apollyon and the bottomless pit, and get all the Christians worked up. And yeah, we'll definitely make a big splash with this one.
Yeah, exactly. And so we never know people's motivations, but when I see something like that, it's like, okay, that's a little too coincidental. I mean, they could have built that anywhere. Literally anywhere they could have built it, and there's probably a lot better places that they could. I mean, on the border of two nations, it's what a weird decision. But again, and then it just so happens that that place was dedicated to Apollo, and they believed the bottomless pit was there, and they venerated Apollo and all that. It's too much to be just a coincidence. I think there was some kind of motivation behind the scenes there.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I say it's just so fascinating for me, because it's, you have the spiritual side and the scientific side, but man, there's definitely some cross pollination, and I'm just kind of standing there like, you know, that's why I bring people like you on, to try to get a better perspective of that other side.
Totally understandable. Well, and the good thing about it too, because you mentioned earlier that you're a layman. I'm a layman too, and so what I do in my books, all of this stuff is available for people to understand. The problem is a lot of scientists and physicists hide behind this really complicated way of speaking. It's almost another language. So then when normal layman people like me and you try to look into quantum physics, it's really, really difficult, because you almost have to learn a new language. Well, in my early time in ministry, I actually had the time to do that, because I didn't have a job. I was on disability. And so I had the time to actually learn that language. And like once I did, and I just read more books, saw more programs, it's like, oh, these concepts are actually accessible to everybody. It's just these scientists don't know how to explain it, because they're used to talking to each other, and they all talk like that. So when they have to talk to lay people like us, they don't know how to do it, and it's lost on us. And then that also breeds all sorts of conspiracy theories. One good example, when a scientist say that there's a chance something could happen, he means something totally different than we do. When we say that, we're like, yeah, could happen, maybe not, 50-50. When a scientist says that, a scientist will say that about anything, because in physics, literally anything is technically possible. So there was a story that went out, because somebody, I don't know exactly how it happened, but some scientist or some physicist went on the record and said, answered a question or something, and said that, yes, there's a chance that the LHC could open a black hole that would swallow the Earth. He doesn't mean, when he says that, he doesn't mean like, and that story blew up. I mean, it freaked a lot of people out. But when a scientist says that, he doesn't mean like, yeah, it could happen, maybe, maybe not, 50-50. He doesn't mean it the way we mean it. A scientist can't really say there's no chance that anything's going to happen. They just can't say that, because there's always a chance. But the chance is so incredibly, incredibly small that it just won't happen. Like it's a kind of different way of thinking. So it's like, well, we might put the word technically in front of it. Technically, there's a chance. Technically, there's a chance I could spontaneously combust if I have one more drink of my coffee. I'm still going to drink my coffee. The chance is so small, but is it technically possible? Yeah. But so they're meaning it like that. So, but the entire way they speak and think is like that. So they're just very different in how they reason and in the words they use than we are. So once I just studied and really looked into it, because it is fascinating to me, and I kind of learned that language, I thought, oh, I can write books and explain all this stuff to lay people so they don't have to learn this language like I do, and then it's accessible. So that for most of my ministry career has been built on that, especially when it comes to the quantum physics stuff. I do it a little bit with like theological things too, but especially with the quantum physics stuff, I like taking things that seem complicated and me knowing that they're actually not. The concepts themselves, at least, they're not complicated. Anybody can understand it, given enough time and the right explanation. I like taking that stuff and then just breaking it down and making it as simple as possible for everybody else. Because I ultimately am a layman too, and I want to know what's going on. So that's a big part of my ministry, and I hope my books do that. And again, I should mention one more time, if people are interested in this kind of stuff, the best resources that I could point to of mine are Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots for this kind of thing. It's all about quantum physics and how it connects back to the ancient false gods, and I get into all that. So those are available at prophecywatchers.com in a package, and I would highly suggest people get it there, because Jeff Bezos doesn't need your $20. Why support Jeff Bezos even more when you can support an awesome prophecy ministry that's really doing a lot of good work in the world? So get it at Prophecy Watchers if you're gonna get those books at all.
Yeah, Bezos, he's good. He's good, bro. Which I was want to ask you too, because you had mentioned it, and the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that CERN could be a potential just modern version of the Tower of Babel? Because I know some people theorize that this was a building not about height. It was about maybe opening this portal to this other realm where these fallen angels were imprisoned in the abyss, and God shut that down.
Absolutely, yeah, and now some people take it too far, and they say that the Tower of Babel was a particle collider. No. We are talking about two essentially different worlds here. So back then, it was a different world than it is today. Back then, occultic magic actually worked. And it's in the Bible. We read about that with Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's magicians could do things that we can't do. And there's a good reason for that. And we're told that in the Bible. The reason is because now the Holy Spirit is dwelling in believers. The Holy Spirit is here, and it really tamps down the kingdom of darkness's power. So now magic doesn't work the same way that it used to. So in the Tower of Babel, they didn't need technology or anything, because I do believe that they were, and this comes from extra biblical text, but I do believe most likely what was going on, it wasn't about the height, because we have really probably towers that are higher than that now, and we send stuff into space, and God's not confusing our languages over it. But it was more about the motivations of the people. God told them to scatter out, and they decided they're not going to do that. They're all going to clump together. But apparently what was going on is, if from what we can piece together from some of these extra biblical sources, Nimrod was ginning up the fear of these people, saying that God's going to send a flood again. And so what we need to do is we need to build this tower so we can get into heaven, and we can kill God and set up our idols in the heavenly throne room. And they're not going to do that by physically building a high tower. There was occult practices going on. They were going to open a portal in a way with occult magic in that way. They didn't need technology. Well, now that the Holy Spirit, and so we know how the story ends, God shut it down and scattered everybody. Well, now we live in a time where magic like that just doesn't really work anymore because of the presence of Holy Spirit-filled believers, the Holy Spirit on the earth. And it's interesting. We even have ancient records of early Christians that would go around, and it's even in the Bible too. Paul did this, but would go around to these oracles and would shut it down. And the like Apollo. There's the ancient church father Lactantius. He recorded this story of how they were speaking to Apollo, essentially. But Apollo, he kept tripping up his words. He kept admitting he was a demon. Like, he kept admitting that, like, on accident. He was trying to boast himself up by saying he was all powerful and the true God. But then he would say, "Call me, O demon." Like, it was like in the presence of these spirit-filled believers, he couldn't even lie anymore. Like, and then eventually he couldn't even talk. He just stopped talking. And as far as we know, has been absolutely silent ever since for 2,000 years. So there's something about that. So now the enemy has to do something different. Okay, the magic stuff isn't working. Well, technology. Maybe we can do it through technology. So, yeah, I do believe that the enemy, the spiritual enemy, could very well be putting ideas in people's heads at CERN to do this stuff, inspiring technological advances. And I'm not saying all technology is evil or anything. It depends on how you use it. But it is weird to me that we didn't have this stuff for thousands of years. And now all of a sudden in the past, I mean, it was only a couple hundred years ago that we're still riding around on horses. Yeah. And now in a really short amount of time, and this could have happened at any time. I mean, we're basically the same kind of people. We have the same resources available. We have the same metals. Like, this could have happened 500 years ago. Why not? But it didn't for some reason. But now it is. And I think I think part of it is prophetic. I think, in a sense, some people will say, like, the veil is thinning. And I think as we progress further on and as we get closer to the end, I think this kind of stuff is going to explode more and more and more. We're going to see a lot more. And we have. I mean, the technological advancements we have are just absolutely insane. Like, brain chips and all sorts of stuff, and particle colliders. Yeah. And
do you see the video of Elon Musk's party? Those robots that were going around serving drinks, playing paper, rock, scissors, and everything else. I mean, that's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's kind of disturbing too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff.
Man, well, Josh, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you coming on. I want to be respectful of your time. I tell a lot of these guests, man, I read y'all's books and listen to you guys talk, and I love these conversations, and I could easily be greedy and keep you here for 3 or 4 hours, but I want to be respectful of your guys' time, because I know that's life's most valuable resource. And it's the weekend. I hear them kids in the background. It's time for some daddy time.
Amen. Well, this has been a lot of fun, a great conversation, and I really appreciate you bringing me on and letting me speak to your audience. I appreciate your time as well.
Yeah, hopefully the first of many. But before I let you go, man, just let everybody know any kind of websites, lectures, upcoming events, anything you want to plug.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my main website is dailyrenegade.com, and that's a place I put my own videos up on there. It's basically YouTube without the censorship, and it's all my videos. I do a weekly show called The Sharpening Report, which I got to get you on there sometime too to talk about your upcoming book. But it's called The Sharpening Report, and that airs every Friday at 7. Now on YouTube, I only put the first half up because the reason Daily Renegade exists is we've had so much censorship issues from YouTube. And I've had full channels deleted. Like I had a channel that had, 80,000 subscribers, and that just deleted. I had to start over. And that's really hard to do, especially when you're a Christian who has a biblical worldview. I mean, YouTube squashes that stuff. So I created Daily Renegade as a place that we can all go and watch videos. There's even a version of Facebook. It's basically YouTube and Facebook put together, just without the censorship. And it's a place where Christians can go and communicate with each other and fellowship. And there's no trolls there. And the reason is I've never had to kick anybody out. There is a membership fee, but there's 2 reasons why. First, I can't afford to run it all by myself. So like if I had enough money to fund that, but I don't. And we don't bring in enough donations to just do donation based just yet, but, or at least it's not consistent enough. But also trolls are pathetic. They are not going to spend their own money to go and troll somebody. They'll do it for free on YouTube. So, so the fellowship that we have at Daily Renegade on the community page is just amazing, and people are free to talk about their own ideas, their own. Like I personally am a pre-trib guy, but I know not everybody is. Everybody's welcome. There's lots of mid-trib, post-trib people on there. Nobody fights. It's exactly what I wanted to build when I started Daily Renegade. And I'm glad that it turned out that way. And again, all my full length videos are on there, plus videos that just aren't available anywhere else. And I continue posting stuff every week. So that's the main website. Obviously, prophecywatchers.com. Prophecy Watchers is putting out a Christmas in Branson prophecy conference coming up here in between December 5th and 8th. And there's live streaming available, and I have a promo code. It is Peck Branson, PeckBranson, all caps, all one word. Use that promo code when you sign up, and then you get live streaming. If you can't make it to the actual event and be there in person, you get live streaming, and then you get that for a long time. I think it's something like a year, maybe. You have access to all these presentations. Because a lot of times the presentations, like 2 will be happening at the same time, so you have to pick and choose. Well, if you get the live streaming package, you can see everything. And I think there's 30 or 40 different speakers now. I'm going to be there. I should have mentioned that at the top. I'm going to be there in person. And so, yeah, people can check that out at prophecywatchers.com. I think that's it. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm on TikTok. And I try to keep up with that stuff, but yeah, I think that's about it. The main thing is dailyrenegade.com and prophecywatchers.com. Thank you for letting me pitch that.
Oh, you're good, man. Hey, you're kind enough to sit down with me and give me your time. I'll give everybody a plug at the end, because if they've made it this far, they're interested and they think you're a smart guy, so that I give them a way to find more.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do that for my guests as well.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to check out Josh's work, man. He's one of the original OGs in this space, and as you can see, he's well-read, real smart, and intelligent guy. So be sure to check his stuff out and contribute to his work at Prophecy Watchers. But guys, yeah, until next time, torch is high.